You have found what lights you up. I'm your host, Sunny the Life Coach, and I'm here because I see you searching for something or someone out there to help you feel better. Something to take away the pain that you're feeling, the inadequacies. I know all of the things that happen in life can leave you feeling empty. Your search is over. This podcast is all about finding your own freedom and power to love yourself enough to shine in the ways you were always meant to, the ways in which you are already fully capable of. If you're ready for some real talk, some serious truth bombs, and a few F-bombs, you are in the right place. Let's do this. Let's get lit. Hey there, welcome to episode 12. How's everyone holding up out there? How is your anxiety? How is your frustration, your anger, your confusion, or your overwhelm? All of the things, all of the feels. I have been really settling into all of the things, really. I've been taking a new perspective than perhaps I would have had all of the events of this year so far. And hello, we're already halfway through the year. Wow. Had all of these events happened a few years ago, I'm not sure how I would be dealing. Probably not too well, if I'm really being honest with myself and with all of you. I look back on how I started this year. Like most of us, I thought the world was going to be very different than it is now. I thought we'd all just be going about our routines and complaining about how we had so much to do, so very busy that we didn't have time for anything. And I remember that my first Facebook Live of the year was about phrases to let go of in 2020. I don't do resolutions, but I do like to pick a word and identify phrases I'd like to eliminate from my vocabulary. Small changes that can have a big impact. My word is focus, by the way. This year, my intent was to focus. At the top of my list of phrases to eliminate was, I'm too busy. I really wanted people to understand that you do actually have time for the things you want to create time for. And then, what do you know? It really started to hit us locally in March, late March, right after spring break, the shuttering of businesses here locally. School closures, all of it. Suddenly we had a lot more time than we could honestly ever remember having. Because we weren't commuting and doing all the things and running to the store every 5 minutes, we were really being mindful of all of the things that we were doing. And suddenly we created more time, a lot more time to self-reflect and find some awareness. I'm seriously looking at this all so much differently, and I feel absolutely blessed to feel the level of gratitude that I do about all of the seemingly awful things happening in our world. Why gratitude? Because it feels like an awakening. When all of our excuses are removed and we have the time to really explore things, that feels like a gift. I normally close my episodes with a quote, but I want to share something at the beginning that I hope will help to set the stage for what I want to talk about today. This one has been making the rounds over the past couple of weeks, and every time I see it, it brings me such a great perspective. Reminds me to find that gratitude. You may have read it by now. And it may serve you to come back to it like it does for me. Reminds me to light up and stay lit. This is by Leslie Dwight. What if 2020 isn't canceled? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw, that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awakening us from our ignorant slumber. A year we finally accept the need to change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. 2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of them all. What if? Damn. That's such a beautiful sentiment, isn't it? It's a great reminder for me that even when the world seems sideways, there is still so much within my control, starting with my thoughts. It seems a good time to reflect on what we thought this year would be and perhaps revisit any resolutions we made or changes or experiences we planned and consider adjusting them as needed. It doesn't have to be January 1st for us to create a new commitment to ourselves. In fact, that's one of the reasons I don't like to do annual resolutions for a new year, but rather take an approach that I can decide at any point in time to make a change. I can take it month by month, or I can set incremental weekly goals. I can do both. I can do whatever I want to do. Or I can choose to do nothing, of course. That's a choice. Just to kind of exist. Which is what I think a lot of us may have been doing up until a few months ago. Because that's when we were so busy, right? Right. Here's another choice that we have that I don't think is always clear for us, and yet we've been presented with an amazing opportunity to explore with everything happening around us, out there in the world, in our communities, perhaps even in our own homes. What triggers us? It's another one of those charged words, really. I'm triggered. It means I'm about to go off because of something someone else did or said, or I'm about to do something in response to that switch that was just flipped in my brain that I have no control over. I want to challenge that today. Now, before I go further, let me clarify that I'm not addressing trauma-related triggers. I think that's on a much deeper level and requires more than I can cover in a simple podcast episode. But for many of us, we are presented with opportunities all of the time to truly examine what it is about something or someone that just sets us off. I've talked about the idea of challenging your thoughts, really exploring them and allowing yourself to question them. We're going to go a little deeper into that exploration now because triggers seem a little different, don't they? They feel like a spontaneous reaction to stimuli. They feel out of your control. But I'm telling you, most of the time, they are in fact within your control. You've just learned and conditioned yourself over time to respond or react to your perceived trigger. And I say perceived. It really is perceived, meaning it's what you experience. Each one of us does not have the same triggers. They are customized especially for us, aren't they? For some of us, it's things other people say, maybe even specific words or phrases that we seem to have an automatic reaction to, or maybe it's the person. We'll say things like, I don't know why, but that man really triggers me. Or we've had a negative experience and something happens that jolts a memory, a place, a thing. It's all different. Let me give you an example of a trigger that I have been able to eliminate. You know I like my stories, so let's do it. When I was a child, I was terrified of snakes. I'm not sure why, but this seems to be common for a lot of us, which is why I think it would be a good enough example to use. If you're triggered by the mere mention of snakes, I invite you to stay with me. I feel like I say that a lot, but honestly, stick it out. Nothing bad is going to happen in my story. Just drop into curiosity. Allow your mind to be curious for a bit instead of going to that first reaction that you know so well. That's part of this experience. My parents owned a greenhouse business when I was around my son's age, 11. In fact, I was exactly that age. I believe I was 10 when they bought the business, expanded it, and our family lived in a house right next to all of these greenhouses. We would raise most of the plants from seed and then sell them to the public. It was a retail business. It was also way out in the country, so it was the closest place for many people in the area to buy plants for their gardens and their porches. Otherwise, it would be a couple of hours' drive to a larger town that had more retail options. Anyway, snakes like to hang around greenhouses. Just FYI, it's pretty much the perfect environment. One day I was running down this slope, kind of the main drag that connected several of the greenhouses. I remember I was running to see a friend that I was excited to see. I couldn't wait to get there, so I just jumped right over this hose that was rolled up at the bottom of the slope. It took me a split second for my brain to register the fact that all of the hoses we owned were bright green and not black. As soon as my brain registered this fact, I had a freaking panic attack. I mean, I was simultaneously gasping and sobbing. My heart was pounding, and I swear I thought I would pass out. I was an absolute mess. I don't even recall what happened after that. Perhaps I even blacked out for a minute. I don't know what happened to the snake. I know it was taken care of. I just remember the absolute terror I felt in that moment of having just casually jumped over a big black snake without even realizing it. I guess all of the things that could have happened went racing through my mind, but let me be very clear. No snake has ever harmed me. Never in my life. So I'm not even sure where the fear came from. One of those things I was subconsciously conditioned to fear, I suppose, by my surroundings, by the people around me, by the stories that I heard growing up. Maybe about how the devil himself presented as a serpent. I don't know. But I was fucking terrified of snakes. I see my son react that way around wasps, or really most insects, but especially wasps. And I don't get it because both my husband and I are super chill around wasps. And I have, in fact, been harmed by wasps. Yet they don't scare me ever. That's so interesting, right? I also think back, and my recollection is that my parents were super chill around snakes, so I picked that up somewhere else. When we moved here to Dallas a few years ago, I started hitting the nature trails by my house all the time. I still do. I talk about that often. Especially now, I'm out there almost daily. They are amazing and I love them. The thing about nature trails is that there is a lot of nature. The thing about these nature trails in particular are the signs all over the place that say, "Watch out for snakes." When I saw those signs 4 years ago when we moved here, I thought, great. Even when we visited a nearby nature sanctuary that does have a few animals in cages on display for us, though it's mostly trails, I did not want to go into the reptile room. No interest whatsoever in seeing snakes, even if they were behind glass. Now, it turns out that my husband made me do it because he wanted me to be able to identify which snakes were the poisonous ones in this area of the country, which ones to watch out for if I spotted them on the trails near our home. Great. See, I still hadn't reconciled my fear of snakes, but I wasn't willing to let the potential of seeing one keep me from walking or biking or anything else, because those trails are my happy place. And it was honestly over 2 years that we were here before I saw one. As much as I'm out there kicking around on the trails, 2 years went by without a single sighting. The day that it happened, I remember it well. I had walked a couple of miles further than I normally do on a Sunday afternoon. I remember it was a beautiful sunny day, and I paused by a pond to meditate quietly for just a few minutes before turning around. And I even thought to myself as I was sitting there that I needed to be aware of any creatures that might come up on me. Now, I was still in a very peaceful place, of course, and I had been doing a lot of thought work and a lot of challenging my own thoughts and long held beliefs through my coaching practice. So when I saw this snake cross right in front of me, probably about 4 to 5 feet in front of me on my path, I just stopped and observed from a place of curiosity and compassion. You know that place where I'm always saying you'll find the sweet spot? Well, I just now said it's the sweet spot, but I find I'm frequently bringing up the importance of curiosity and compassion, not just with others, but also when you're exploring your own thoughts. My friends, curiosity and compassion is the sweet spot. Instead of running the other way, I just stood and watched, curious, compassionate. And my thoughts went something like this: that snake doesn't give a shit that I'm here. That snake is just trying to get to wherever it's going. Wow. Look how elegantly it moves back and forth in waves. I've never noticed that before. It's actually quite fascinating and beautiful. No kidding. That moment was an awakening, and it flipped a new switch in my brain. Snakes aren't scary at all. Not unless I have thoughts that generate fear. I continued that day on my walk after the snake crossed my path right in front of me. Normal heartbeat and not at all shaky. It was so wild to feel just chill about it. I'd often heard people say that snakes are more afraid of you than you are of them. And while it made sense, it never really clicked until I started seeing them differently. I had to go through my own process. It wasn't enough for someone else to tell me that. Just as it isn't enough for us to tell our son that he doesn't need to be so petrified of wasps, we still have some work to do there. He needs to go through his own process, and that includes managing all of the thoughts that come up when he sees a wasp or a June bug or any other insect. I know, weird. But it isn't really weird. Like I said, your triggers are yours. Some of us may share similar triggers, but the reasons behind them are unique to our experiences or even the stories we tell ourselves, because no one in this household has ever had a traumatic experience involving a reptile or an insect, I promise. Remember, in the context of this particular lesson, my friends, I'm not talking about triggers generated from trauma. That's not to say that wouldn't apply on some level, though it would certainly depend where you are on your journey toward healing from your trauma. When you act or react from a perceived trigger, it feels involuntary in the moment, and you may do or say something you can't take back. That is what it is. What's done is done. Now, if you want to work toward eliminating future instances, though, you need to step out of emotional childhood and become the adult for yourself. We are in emotional childhood when we react. We don't know any better. We haven't been taught any better. All we know to do is throw a tantrum in our brains about something we don't agree with or we don't like. We behave like toddlers. That's coming from our primitive brain, that basic instinct. Something doesn't feel right and we don't feel safe around that trigger. It's time to explore why. Here's what you do. Write it all out. All of your thoughts about the thing or the person or the place, whatever it is that triggers you, write it out. Don't hold back. Say why, if you know why. Or what's your earliest memory? What can you tie it back to? What stories have you been telling yourself? After you've written it out, that's when you step into emotional adulthood and start questioning that emotional child with curiosity and compassion. Where's the conflict? You see, there's some kind of internal conflict that needs to be identified. That's what triggers really are. Something is out of alignment with everything else. That's why your body is sending these signals, almost like a fight or flight response. It's your cue to explore what's wrong. For me, I realized where I was out of alignment with snakes was my overall love for all living creatures, all of the animals on this planet. I've been that way from a very young age. I would walk around ant hills. I never minded spiders. Now, I don't want them crawling on me, but I really don't want any living thing to die. And I certainly don't want to bring harm to any animal, even unintentionally. So I have always watched where I stepped. I know it's weird. If I do find a bug in my house, I'm happy to scoop it up and show it out the door. That's who I am. I love every living creature. And I loved every one of them except snakes until recently, until I learned to view them differently than I had been doing my entire life. Now I feel in alignment, and now when I see them, it's simply fascination. Oh, look, a snake. My son and I were walking the trails recently, and he was playing photographer, taking all of these pictures with the DSLR camera that his dad dusted off because dads are amazing. Please don't forget Father's Day is on Sunday. The boy stepped off the path at one point, and I quickly realized what looked like a stick right near his foot was a snake. It was being as still as a stick, of course, because yes, snakes are more afraid of us than we are of them. Instead of freaking out, screaming, shaking, I said, "Hey, check it out." And I pointed to the snake. He took a couple of steps back, cool, started taking pictures. Yes, it was cool. It was chill. We took our photos and went on our merry way to look for turtles in the creek. Moving on, just another living creature. It feels so great to be totally chill at the sight of a snake. It truly does. What about triggers from other humans? Here's what I found with that. My husband and I tend to trigger each other from time to time, even after 19 years. I think Monday was the last time. What I found is that when someone triggers me by something they've said, I usually feel defensive, and that's my clue. If I'm feeling defensive and a need to explain my point of view, that generally means that there's something about what the other person has said that just might be true. Or I'm feeling very, very vulnerable or called out, and I don't like it. One of the things that other people would say, that they used to say, that would trigger me when I was struggling with infertility was, "When are you going to have kids?" Of course, I knew that they were well-meaning questions. They had no idea what I was going through. They didn't mean anything by it. It was just a question. It's not like I was walking around wearing a label of all the words and phrases that would offend my fragile state of mind when it came to that particular topic. And what if I had worn a label? Would that really stop anyone? Everyone? But man, would that question trigger me. I would feel my whole body tense. My jaw would clench, and I wouldn't always respond in a kind and understanding way. Sometimes I would snap. I just reacted. At the time, it felt involuntary. I didn't do the work on myself then because I didn't know how to do it. I allowed myself to feel anger or frustration with other people for triggering me instead of taking responsibility for myself. Asking myself, what are you making that mean about you? No, it was always the other person's fault for asking an insensitive question. They should have known better. How dare they simply assume that the ability to create a life is just inherent to every person. And we apply this to just about anything we ultimately decide to apply it to, don't we? Once my friend, after having known me for years, my good friend, my dearest friend, reached across the table at dinner and touched the mole over my left eyebrow and said, "What's that?" as if it didn't belong there. So I was immediately defensive. That's a part of me, is what it is. Fuck off. Yeah, honestly, I had to ask myself later, well, does that mole really belong there? Should I see about having it removed? But why would I be doing that? Because I want to, or because someone else finds it strange? I decided that the mole did belong there, and so it remains, but do you see where I'm going here? That's my decision. What triggers you is your decision. What triggers us is what we allow to trigger us. It's like any other decision that you make. You get to own it. Make a decision, like your reasons, and move on, but keep that ownership because it really is yours. Know that what other people post online, what they say, what they do, what they don't do, that's not the trigger. Your thoughts about those things become your triggers. Own them. Take that responsibility instead of offloading it to someone else. That's where your power is. There isn't a single snake that has crossed my path in my life that had evil intent to send me into a frenzy. That was all me. Those snakes were just going about their business doing snake things, chilling. I can't tell you how freeing it has been to let go of that unnecessary fear. Fear I have held for almost a lifetime until I questioned whether it was truly serving me and if I could challenge myself to see things through an entirely different lens. But again, that was my decision. You can certainly decide that you're not ever going to be okay with snakes. That's completely fine. That's your decision. Find peace with it. Maybe you can at least find a willingness to try to adjust the response so it's not at the level of a panic attack, but instead it becomes, I'm just going to turn around and walk the other way now. I'm going to react calmly and remove myself. That's an option too. There are as many options as there are triggers. I just want you to know that it's possible to change it all around. There are so many things that your mind is capable of that you aren't even aware of. Another kind of awakening. With all of the memes about 2020, what about the murder hornets? Is the alien invasion scheduled for July? With all of the discomfort floating around, when I saw the perspective of Leslie Dwight that I shared earlier, it was so refreshing. I really connected with it because that is exactly the way that I wanted to view this time that we're in, as an opportunity. An opportunity to turn inward and explore our discomfort, to really face the things that are holding us back, and to turn it all around, find new perspectives, learn and grow, new ways of living your life, letting go of things that no longer serve you, starting with simple phrases that have become so habitual that you don't even realize all of the ways that you're allowing them to define your experience. Going all the way into new ways to manage your reaction to things that just are. It all just is. Today's Rumi quote is also intended to acknowledge all of the spring break and summer vacation plans that were screwed by circumstances beyond your control. I know there are many, but take all of that in context with what I've also just shared with you. Here we go with Rumi. You have no need to travel anywhere. Journey within yourself. Enter a mine of rubies and bathe in the splendor of your own light. Such an amazing teacher. I don't always close with Rumi, but when I do, damn, it's timeless. Most of the time I do close with Rumi for that very reason. How fantastic could it truly be if this is the year that you find lasting change? What if, in the midst of all of the loss or the darkness you see happening around you, and perhaps the losses you have experienced yourself, you find you? How amazing would that be? My first coaching session is always free. It's truly try before you buy. Why wouldn't you try something new right now? A new way of looking at this life you're experiencing, a life that is entirely within your control. I promise you'll be forever changed if you can open up to it. Now is the time. Just go to sunnythelifecoach.com, click work with me, and you're in. I hope to see you soon. Shine on.